It is said that the primary aim of Greek philosophy or even Greek philosophers were to help men uh, in living a good life and giving precepts, examples, and ideas for that. But in due course of time, things became so complicated that what started as a kind of practical subject turned into a very complex discipline with its own internal rigorous rules, and people forgot the basic aim. Now, taking a cue from this, I want to come to this contentious issue of the function of literature. What is the function of literature? Or does it have any function at all? That is, of course, another question, but as I'm going to discuss it now, it will tackle this also. There are broadly two views regarding this. Some think that the function of literature is purely aesthetic, that is, to give pleasure, while there are other groups who believe, like the Marxists, feminists, even the lit writers, uh, queer writers, who believe that literature has and should have a social agenda. That is to bring reformation in society, to bring change in society. So there comes the question of this ethical criticism and ethical reading. Now, going back in history, as I said from the beginning, like philosophy, there was a deep concern with ethics in literatures throughout the world. Though Plato had banished the poets from his ideal state because there was not as much ethics as he would have wanted, but we cannot say Homer was immoral. But Plato set even a higher standard for literature to comply with, and he found Homer lacking, for instance. Even in India, though I have said that we shouldn't call Ramayana and Mahabharata epics, they are much more than that. Anyway, we have a similar pattern because the basic shloka in the Indian canon which introduces Ramayana is said that you should behave like Ram, not like Ravan. Ramadivat pravartitavyam na Ravanadivat. So same thing, good and evil and all that. So this was continuing. However, during the Romantic Age, there was a focus in entire Europe, starting in Germany basically, that Sturm und Drang and Storm and Stress movement, though we see its full maturity in England. Some would like to call it romantic revival because already there was a romantic age in England during the Elizabethan age. Anyway, so during the romantic age, what got priority was person's self expression, not morals and ethics, as was the concern of the previous age or even ages. So, more or less, the romantic poets tried to deal with even taboo themes, even incest, Shelley's The Chenchi, incestuous love, and all these things. So morality took a backseat. Wordsworth spoke about one particular kind of morality, chiefly, that is living in harmony with nature. But his ideas regarding, man to man or man women relation was not that rigid or strong. Though some people would like to identify him as a moralist, but he was not. He started like that, but gradually became a liberal. So it continued throughout the Victorian age, and in modern age, it became fully manifest that literature does not serve any purpose. In between Victorian and modern, there were these decadents who most famously or infamously started the art for art's sake movement. Here, our Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore's views are also more or less same. If you read Tagore's essays on literature, he most often says or seems to suggest that literature is not for, any practical or mundane gain as such. Literature has to be read primarily for aesthetic pleasure. But we cannot say that Tagore was any moralist. But anyway, now leaving Tagore aside, the aesthetes or the decadents, as we call them, because they insisted on art for art's sake, this Ernest Dowden, Lionel Johnson, and Oscar Wilde, the most famous of them, who was also tried for homosexuality, which is a taboo then. All this suggested that literature is for pleasure. It has nothing to do with teaching you something. Yes, in between, Yeah, I skipped something. In the Victorian age, there were tremendous attempts also by some poets, primarily by Matthew Arnold, more than any other else. Browning was a liberal. Arnold and some prose writers that tried to enforce morality. We know about Victorian morality. But if we read, say, Robert Browning, D.J. Rossetti, and many others, it was not fixed. But with the decadence, it became very clear that literature has nothing to do with morality, and modernism made it crystal clear. All taboo themes, D.H. Lawrence and other things, they are not at all, in fact, they attacked morality. And this again was continued in criticism also, new criticism. As Archibald MacLeish famously would say that a poem must not mean but be. That is, it must exist as an aesthetic thing. Yeats also suggested the same in certain ways. Now, coming from that, as I've often suggested, this deconstruction and post structuralism are, in a way, offshoots of new criticism's cousin, formalism, or extended discourses of those. So they also, like Foucault, and more famously Derrida, were concerned with power politics. Foucault and Derrida with intricacies of language and meaning. Or ethics was not there. So already there was a vacuum in society, in critical thinking, critical society. People are maybe getting bored with this excessive liberalism, maybe indirect promotion of licentiousness, and then you know the Marxists, of course, are clamoring continuously that this postmodernism, deconstruction, all these things are promoting capitalism, because if you say everything is true, then you need not content any discourse. All can go. Even if you, kill someone, then that is also ethical, because from your point of view, that is right. That would be the argument of deconstructionists, or postmodernists rather, who believe in plurality of truth. But that way society cannot move, so some check must be there. But the final in a way kind of check came from another thinker, Emmanuel Levinas. He more or less broadly against Derrida, he insisted that we have a kind of absolute commitment to the other, to our others. Of course, there are multiple others with gendered other and all, but he talks about other in more of a singular term. Whoever is different from you is your other, and you have an absolute obligation to the other. You cannot keep doing things just like that, just for yourself. You have to always think about the other. So this is as simple as that, though he wrote in slightly complicated language. And so this revived, the concern for ethics, as we call it. Morality is slightly a dated term, ethics is more important term. There are other minor differences. Morality, some say it is personal, ethics is public. But anyway, I'll go into that finaries maybe in another video. But it was Levinas whose contribution was most important in reviving the ethical thing. So we call this also the ethical turn. Levinas against Derrida. So against postmodernism, there is this ethical criticism. There are many things unsaid in 8 to 10 minutes video. In an 8 to 10 minutes video, how much you can say. I would also like to add Said. He continuously attacked this postmodernists, said lazy incapacities of Baudrillard and others. I mean, the entire discourse of post-colonialism is basically about ethics. Though some post-colonial thinker like Bhabha, they go to excessive obfuscation, but more or less as Said, Gayatri, Dipesh Chakraborty, these people, therefore ethics. So that is about ethical reading, ethical criticism, and ethical, uh, you know, we can say living also. So more or less now there is a consensus of, though we have had postmodernism and aestheticism and all that, that literature cannot just be irresponsible, or art can't just be irresponsible. It has some responsibility to our society. And it may not be exactly morality in the older sense, but just that literature or critics, literary writers, they have to be accountable in some way or other. So that is what ethical criticism tells us. So this is all about ethical criticism. Please check and do some reading on Emmanuel Levinas also. Thank you.